Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hello, and welcome to the show. Yeah, my gosh, how did it get to be December 13th? And how come the sky's still blue? Woo! All good. Everything's good. Kinda. I have to tell you, I did not sleep at all last night, so I might be a little punch drunk here. The reason I did not sleep is I don't even know if I should tell this to you. Why am I doing this? Oh, well. It was maybe 40 years ago that I received a letter. I was, at the time, a television reporter for WTAE TV, and also I had a radio talk show, also on WTAE AM. And I received a letter from a prisoner at Western Penitentiary. And it was incredibly well written. He was writing, I can't remember now. I don't even remember what happened yesterday. I'm supposed to remember 40 years ago. It was an interesting letter. I know that. There was no doubt in my mind that I would reply to it. There was nothing personal about it. He was engaging me about something that I had spoken about on the radio show, or I believe. And I wrote him back. And this is so long ago that I do recall, and he later reminded me because he kept my letter. And there were a few others exchanged. And then I didn't hear from him. But I received a letter from him maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And he reintroduced himself. He was still a prisoner. I was thinking, wow, he's been in prison all this time. And he engaged me again in very interesting conversations about world events, a lot of times about wars, about religion. He obviously keeps the letters he gets, and I believe the letters he sends. He must have this huge number, because it became clear that I was not the only person he was writing to. That I guess I began to understand that one of the ways that he tolerated his life behind bars was to engage people in these serious conversations on serious topics. And he obviously is a voracious reader. So often he sends, along with his letters, copies he makes of articles that he alludes to, or that he wants me to remark upon. And there's really been a deluge of letters from him in the last few months. And I think much of it because of Israel and Gaza. And he is a pacifist. He, I think, like so many, again, in prison, turned to religion to bear his life. And he is a Jehovah's Witness. I don't think he was before he went into prison. I think I once, way back in the 80s, asked him what he was in for, and I did not get a reply. And I thought, okay, this is not what he wants to talk about. I didn't press. And so we continued. I sent him a letter yesterday. It was long overdue. I had 3 or 4 from him. And they require work. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry that I'm not such a conscientious correspondent because you make me think about stuff. You make my head hurt. He asked questions about, morality and humanity and religion and all of this. And he is so articulate in his in expressing his viewpoints that it's difficult not to respond in a serious way and to give it some thought. And I also have this sense. I was avoiding responding because it's so much. It's work. And then I thought, for God's sake, this man has been behind bars for almost his entire life, and you are fancy free. You can't take an hour and write to him. It's always on my to-do list, but I always sort of, but I finally yesterday did a long letter in response. And a friend was over last night, and I happened to mention that I'd sent this letter off, and I think I showed her some of what he had sent me because it's so unusual and so interesting. He sent me this Wall Street Journal piece about the Haggadah, the book that Jews read at Passover. And I learned something in it that I had never, it blew me away, actually. So I was telling her about this, and I think maybe she asked, well, what's he in for? And I said, well, I presume he killed somebody, because you don't spend your entire life. He's got to be about my age. You don't spend your entire life in prison if you didn't kill somebody, or maybe, like some poor souls, you were part of a group and you didn't pull the trigger, but you were driving the car or something, and you still got life. But I have met men who spent most of their lives in prison and have finally gotten out in their 60s and 70s. But I cannot believe that I never bothered to find out why he was there. But last night I said to my friend, do you think I could find out? And she said, well, of course, just Google him. And I thought, well, but Google him, she said, and put murder after his name. And then she told me, maybe you don't want to do that because it might be unsettling to find out why he's there. And I thought, no, I mean, there was something so bizarre about me not 40 years. Anyway, I Googled. And oh my God, never in my wildest imaginings did I think I would see what I saw. He, at the age of 18, bludgeoned his father to death, his mother to death, and also killed his two younger brothers. There was a New York Times article. I have been numb since. My thoughts are all over the place. There was also a recent article about the Supreme Court denying his attempt to get out after all this time. Because, I mean, and I would agree, this guy is no threat to anybody anymore. Whatever the hell his 18-year-old self was, that is not what he is now. But for people, his family, how do you live with something like that? And then I think, well, you become you believe in a religion that might still forgive you. You engage your intellect, and it's he's smart, and you reach out as much as you can to people you want to engage, and he has sent me copies of letters he has received from often incredibly interesting people, and people whose names I know, like Deborah Lipstadt, I believe she's the anti-Semitism czar in the Biden administration. Holocaust denial is her specialty, and she won a landmark case in Great Britain against a Holocaust denier decades ago. And she has engaged with him. And the former religion editor or writer at, I believe, Newsweek or Time, whose work I used to really enjoy, and I'm blanking on his name. I think it's like Woodward, maybe. It's not quite right. There were letters from him. I cannot imagine how many people he corresponds with. But the Supreme Court case, by the way, he lost. He made an effort to get out because he had, the Supreme Court had said that people who'd been sentenced to life for committing murders when they were juveniles under 18 could apply for parole. And many have gotten out because of that Supreme Court ruling. And he must have petitioned them by saying, hey, I'm 4 months. I was 18 years old and 4 months into my 19th year. Come on. And they said no. And I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know. The reason I can't think straight is my questioning of myself, or my incuriosity, or my refusal to want to deal with why he was. But never in my wildest imaginings could I have believed what I saw. And now there is a letter I wrote him yesterday in the mail. And I don't know how to continue. I guess I should tell him. And I guess it doesn't, I don't know. This is why I didn't sleep. Okay. I did not sleep. I think the one thing that I am aware of is that over the years, I mean, every time I'd get a letter from him, it hurt my heart because it just imagining, what it would be to be him, to be imprisoned, and how his brain allowed him to get beyond the bars that separated him from the world. And I'm an empathetic person, so it used to just make me feel so sad. And then thinking, my God, he's got to be old now. What purpose is served by keeping somebody behind bars for their entire lives when the crime they committed was committed when their brains weren't even fully developed? So we know that. But now, seeing the crime, I must say I feel a little less sympathy and a little more, well, hey, hey, you killed your mother and father. But even worse than that, you killed your two young brothers. You stole their lives. You took 4 lives. What is unjust about you now? Having to forfeit your freedom, not your life. My friend said, why didn't he get the death penalty? And for all I know, he did. I don't know. I did not delve further. And the fact, it's funny. I almost feel like I'm, the reason I didn't want to talk about this is I feel somewhat odd, protective of him because of our long association. Good God. And like I'm talking behind his back. I had asked one of the men that I met who spent most of their lives in Western Penitentiary if they knew him. And he said, oh, yeah, I know. And I didn't, again, my incuriosity, I could tell the guy I asked he didn't say, oh, yeah, I know him. He just said, I know him. And now I'm wondering if that response wasn't because even in that prison with other people who have taken a life, that his crime wasn't seen as somehow more heinous. I don't know. So, I didn't sleep, and nor should I have. Okay. And it's odd. I hadn't thought I was going to share that, but I guess I needed to. As again, what it says about me, what it says about him, what it says about justice. And it's interesting that these are subjects that fascinate him. And in fact, I told him in this letter I wrote yesterday that my brother, I said, wrote a book about vengeance called An Eye for an Eye. I think you might like it. Am I able to send you a book? Please let me know. Okay. Well, I'm going to try to go on. This news broke just as the show was beginning. The Supreme Court's got a lot on its plate. They have agreed to decide this term whether to limit access to the abortion pill. It'll be the first time they've taken up a reproductive rights issue. They've been petitioned on a number of occasions too, and they've batted every one of those back, but this time, and it is a case that's brought by the Justice Department, the Biden administration, actually, and the drug company that whose drug it is, mifepristone, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. And they're asking that a lower court ruling be overturned by the Supreme Court. The lower court having ruled that ruling made it more difficult to obtain it anyway. So it's interesting that they agreed to review this case even as the issue of abortion and their decision overturning Roe led this week to the outrageously mind-blowing story about the Texas woman carrying essentially a non-viable fetus, and the Texas Supreme Court telling her tough. Even though her doctors have said continuing the pregnancy could jeopardize her health and her ability to conceive in the future. So that's interesting. Even more interesting, but terrifying, is something that Susan and I talked about a little bit yesterday, which is that the Supreme Court has agreed to expedite the question of whether or not a former president has absolute immunity from federal prosecution for crimes committed while he was in office. And that case is terrifying because, and I don't know that I appreciated this. So Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, this is quite an astonishing gamble he's taking. This guy is a serious fighter for justice. He is a gunslinger for justice. I must say, my respect for him knows no bounds. But this is a scary thing he's doing. Asking the Supreme Court to expedite and rule on Trump's this is Trump's get out of jail free card. His defense is that he has executive immunity from all of these charges. And to even bring the charges against him as such is unconstitutional. And Smith, in asking the court, said that we recognize that this is an extraordinary request, but this is an extraordinary case. What Trump and his legal team are trying to do with all of these, as you know, with all of these appeals and coming up with roadblocks here that then have to be dealt with at the court and then appealed and then dealt with and appealed, is running out the clock. He's hoping that none of these trials come to fruition before the election, which he obviously feels he can win. Well, one thing we know, he can't lose because he will not accept a loss. So if he is the nominee, and even if he loses, there will be hell to pay, right? But if he wins, which is not impossible at all, if he wins, he will dismiss all of these charges. He again, get out of jail free. Insurrection, no big deal, none of it. It's gone. So that's why it's an extraordinary case and needs to be expedited so Smith can bring the case in March when it's scheduled to begin. Now, the fact that the court has said, well, okay, and they've given the Trump team until I think, the 20th of this month to respond. But then the odds are, I guess, they're going to take it, right? And this is not something the Supreme Court does very often, skipping over lower appeals courts. It was used during the Nixon Watergate era, and when then President Nixon refused to turn over the tape recordings that were found to exist that were conversations in the Oval Office. It turns out he had taped everything. And so obviously the special prosecutor wanted them. And Nixon said, you can't have those. That's totally executive privilege there. Are you kidding me? That went on an expedited basis to the Supreme Court. And he lost, right? Nixon must have lost because that's when we found out there was that big gap, big tape, the missing 17 minutes that his secretary, took the fall for him, Rosemary Woods. She said, I must have accidentally, and it was absurd. But anyway, okay, so there was that. Now, I thought, and I said this yesterday, Susan, it's pretty damn scary that Jack Smith is taking this to this Supreme Court, which is packed with Trump's own lackeys, people he put on the court. And actually, the biggest lackeys are not people he put on the court. The biggest lackeys are, of course, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. They were already there. But a piece in today's New York Times tells me that while this current court, the Roberts Court, has voted, just consistently, practically, in favor of anything that upholds their conservative policies, like overturning of Roe and reversing affirmative action and eviscerating the Voting Rights Act. They've done all of that. Great work. But the reality is that this same court has, according to the Times, shown less of an appetite for supporting Trump's attempts to monkey with the democratic process. A case in point, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in 2020 that Trump had no absolute right to block the release of his financial records from investigators in a criminal inquiry. So this had to do with, justice, criminal justice. And they said no. In fact, they said, this was from their opinion, no citizen, not even the president, is categorically above the common duty to produce evidence when called upon in a criminal proceeding. So there's that. And there's also this, giving you some hopefulness here. Last year, this same court refused a request from Trump to block the release of White House records concerning the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And in doing so, they pretty much rejected his claims of executive privilege. Now that's getting close to where Jack Smith's coming from, right? So the court just last year sided with the original decision. And by the way, the decision they were agreeing with was penned by none other than the same judge who's hearing the January 6th case, Shutkin. And it was her opinion, and her opinion was filled with scathing words rejecting Trump's claims of executive privilege. And the court, the Supreme Court, didn't let it stand. They didn't take it. They let it stand. And that's the one where she wrote, presidents are not kings. And the plaintiff is not president. So, I got to tell you guys, this is the day that one comes out. Talk about not being able to sleep. Oy, yeah. So, in this piece I read today, here's the thing that made me think, yeah. So the piece asks, so what will happen next? Well, it says, if the Supreme Court takes the case. Now, I sort of thought they'd said they were, but I guess they're waiting for what Trump's people say, and then I guess they formally say, okay, we'll take it. But, or not. If the Supreme Court takes the case, and listen to this because it's scary, and if the court, after taking the case that Smith wants them to take in an expedited fashion, having to do with Trump saying he's immune as president, then the indictment against him would be tossed out. And there would be no trial on the election interference charges. That's what's riding on this. If the court finds for Trump on this and not for Jack Smith, it's over. But if the court hears the case and sides with the special prosecutor, Smith, the trial will be held, and likely on schedule. So you want something big riding on this court? And here's the other thing. How is it possible that Clarence Thomas is allowed a vote on this case having to do with the insurrection, the attempt to overturn the election, when his own wife was part of it? Any honorable justice in that situation would immediately recuse themselves. But I said any honorable justice. Incredible. Incredible. Okay. Have a caller. Hello.
Good morning. How are you doing today? Besides not having any sleep.
Okay.
I do agree that it's a gamble, but I think that Jackson is doing is he could be saving time, because if they rule on it, then it's like, okay, let's pack up and move on to other things. It'll be awful, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, why go down this path if it's all for nothing, right? So it does make sense why he's doing it, right?
But if they say he's immune by virtue of being president, doesn't that possibly then throw out the other cases? It's like,
absolutely.
Well, yeah, that like throws out everything. Does it throw out Georgia? That's what I can't. I mean, in other words, he cannot be criminally held to account because he's the president? It's insane.
No, it is insane, but it could happen anyway. I mean, instead of finding out in a long, drawn-out way over years, we're going to know in months, right? I mean, it's scary as hell. I'm not saying it's not, but because my thing is, what I'm thinking, and I know I live in La La Land sometimes, but you know what? If we're worried that not just Trump, but any president, because it's a precedent, that president can pretty much do whatever the hell he wants and be immune from any type of criminal charges at all. That's what we're talking about. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So what maybe to put some pressure on, and I can't see it happening, but you know what? Biden's going to say, I'm arresting Trump. Okay, Supreme Court, make your decision. Are presidents immune from criminal prosecution? And if they are, then I'll just have the son of a bitch executed. I mean, I know that won't happen, but why not? Because this is the reason why presidents have to be held accountable, because
of course
of retribution and all these other things. So, I mean, right before the Supreme Court makes a decision, maybe Biden says, I'm arresting Trump because I feel like it. Okay, Supreme Court, what do you think about this case now? And then it's like, okay, if Trump's innocent, Biden's innocent, and that would all be wrong. Correct? I mean, it's ridiculous, but
but this court, well, we'll see. The more I think about it, Smith is such a smart cookie that he must figure there's no way this court will agree with Trump, because it would mean that the rule of law is a sham.
I think he's definitely laying all the cards on the table, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. We shall see. Interesting why you didn't sleep last night, because it comes down to me, I think about forgiveness.
Yeah.
And about the prisoner. And it's been, you say 40 plus years, you think?
Yes, I think he's going on 50 years behind bars.
Yeah. I mean,
my guess is he's in his late 60s. Is my guess.
So my from my position would be like, come on, what's the purpose anymore? But then
well,
again,
that is true.
I'm not a victim. I've never been a victim of this. My family, so who am I to say?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to get other perspectives on that. And not somebody who was victimized yesterday, but somebody who's victimized decades ago, and see what they would think about it. That would be an interesting question.
No, I can see where you could argue. I can see where you could argue both sides of it. If it was just a single murder, but 4 and 2 kids, no, then it becomes heinous. But what purpose is served by, again, keeping him behind bars, which is expensive? Again, taxpayer dollars going to keep this guy who is no threat to anybody anymore. But how do I know?
I just think, in the heat of the moment, I think young men especially can do some terrible things.
Yes.
They're just completely irrational.
Right.
And
it said it was an argument with his father. And an argument with his father after he dropped out of college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just so much could be involved in that. And I just don't see what the purpose is. But again, I don't know. I've never been affected by it.
Me either. So, all right.
So we'll get some sleep tonight.
I hope. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And in another thing, Smith also, just before we let that go, he has revealed that the government, this is rich, that the government expects to introduce, in its case, the testimony of experts who are going who I guess have had access to cell phones used by Trump and some other, I guess, figures in the case. They somehow have cell phones. Now, what's fascinating about that is, remember the whole Hillary Clinton lock her up thing? And that was because she supposedly misused her laptop? A president having a remember? Obama couldn't have one. You can't have you have to be on a restricted whatever. There has to be care taken in presidential communications, and they must in fact be saved. Trump, we know, was notorious for ripping up papers that should have gone to the National Archives. He totally covered up his trail as much as he could, flushing things down the toilet, ripping them up, not even trusting in the burn bags that I guess are used for things that should be, because he didn't trust that the deep state would actually burn them. And now we know he was on cell phones. And if they have access to his communications on January 6th, and apparently, I guess these experts say, they can, because of the cell phone, show where he was when certain calls were made. And I got to tell you, that means they've probably got some extraordinarily rich and incriminating stuff on this seditious son of a bitch. The story that I had a lot of trouble even looking at yesterday was Zelensky. This is the guy who the Congress, this Congress, yelped and cheered, standing ovations, invited to speak to a joint session. He was a hero. They couldn't give him enough. And bango, the Republicans turn on a dime. Why? Because they see a way to get Biden. If Ukraine's got to fall to Russia, if they give a gift to Putin, it's okay, because what's important is getting Biden. In the Atlantic, David Frum, who used to be a Republican, right, has criticized Democrats, and rightfully so, on immigration policy. I mean, the Democrats haven't dealt with it. The Republicans haven't dealt with it. We as a nation haven't dealt with it. It is something that has to be dealt with, and it's one of those things about, splitting babies, and then King Solomon ain't around. So everybody just pontificates and bloviates and avoids. But Biden has reached out and said, hey, look, I know you're tying aid to Ukraine to this, and I'm willing to compromise here. We got to talk here. And Frum said the Republicans don't want to make a deal. They don't want to talk. They want to engage in their performative, game and bring this border thing up and try to drown out the abortion stuff, like in Texas and stuff that's going to hurt them, because they think the border security is the way they win votes and possibly the presidency again. Republicans don't give a damn about anything but holding power. And they don't even care about American overall power in the world, because they are harming America in the eyes of the world. Are standing as like an ally that can be trusted, that is stalwart, that is steady. There's nothing steady about the way we look to the rest of the world, and it's by virtue of these crazed white nationalist fascistic Republicans. They don't care about national security. They don't care about Ukraine security. They don't care about foreign policy. They just want to get Biden. And in that regard, they are absolutely hand in glove with Vladimir Putin. Again, there they are. Putin sure wants Biden to lose. He wants his boy Trump back in. And man, these MAGA Republicans, they want Biden to lose too. If the United States gets hurt in the process, well, and I told you yesterday, Russian media are just going berserk. And I noted that yesterday afternoon, the president called attention to the same thing that I had a morning. That they're celebrating these Republicans in Moscow. It's incredible. And this creep, Mike Johnson, God, the Speaker of the House, second in line to the presidency of the United States, he said to Vladimir Zelensky, "We stand with you." And then he votes against them every time. He has never once voted for aid. You can't, is perfidy the word? Perfidy? What is that word? Isn't that interesting how a word just like comes into your head, a word you've never really used? And is that a word, the word I think it is? I'm checking. Hang on. Perfidy. Does it mean evil? Why can't I even get my perfidy? Untrustworthiness, deceitfulness. Okay, perfidy. That's a word you don't hear. I don't know that I've ever said it out loud. You see that guy in the Polish parliament grab a fire extinguisher and use it to suffocate the menorah lights that had been lit in the parliament building. You see that? Whoa. He's part of the, the anti-Jew right-winger party there that lost power yesterday. So he was there. They had been under the thumb of a nationalistic, racist, anti-Semitic party for the last 8 years. And in the last election, damn if the Polish people didn't throw those sons of bitches out. There's been a lot of damage done, a lot of damage. But, and one thing, their new, is it President Tusk or Prime Minister? I'm not sure. The guy who's now in charge, he came out with a full-throated endorsement of Ukraine and said Poland will move to do anything and everything it can to help. Whereas, of course, the people that had been in power there were Putin pals, like Orban in Hungary, like the Republicans in the United States. They don't like democracy, and they want it to fail. Hey, did you see what the grifter-in-chief is doing lately? He's found a new way to get idiots to give him money. The suit he wore for his mugshot photo, he says he has cut it into pieces. And people who buy, I can't even, you can't even make this up. What is it? He says he is selling snippets of the clothes he wore the day of his arrest in Georgia. And to get it, people have to buy 47 digital cards, trading cards. These NFTs, these things that don't, non-fungible, whatever, I don't know. It's sort of like, to me, cryptocurrency. It's like it doesn't exist, but you put value on it. A digital trading card, 47 digital cards for $99 each. They'll receive part of his suit. I bet. $99 each for $47. Whoa. So that's essentially for $5,000, right? Pretty much, give or take. You get these trading cards, and you get a snippet of the suit he wore in his famous mugshot picture, and you get a dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Well, you got to say, this guy's, he's got a lot of class, doesn't he? Oh, jeez. Oh, man. Okay, I guess that's it. Where'd the time go? It is it. Thank you all for being here. Tomorrow will be my last show of the year. I'm taking next week off. It's a notoriously hard week where nobody's paying attention to anything but getting ready for the consumer onslaught of the season. So again, I haven't said this for a while. If you haven't sent me your email, will you send it? I got such a long list. Might even be longer than Santa's. I've got a really long list. I need your emails. So send your email. That's all you have to do. You just say, Lynn, here's my email, to lynncullenshow@gmail.com, because who knows, in 2024, I might be moving a little bit. Okay? And I want to be able to tell you where. Okay? Thank you. Have a good one. Toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.